Number one, he doesn't think that the prosecutors have done the job. Number two, he doesn't have those people.
They said the quiet part out loud, in front of the jury. For nearly a month, the courtroom has heard whispers, speculations, and carefully worded testimony. But on day 28, the masks drop. Prosecution laid out raw, explicit digital evidence. And it wasn't just shocking, it was organized, deliberate, and disturbingly casual. Messages between Diddy's own staff didn't just raise eyebrows, they stopped the room cold. Phrases like, refresh her bag of dicks, orders for Astroglide, baby oil, this wasn't locker room talk, it was logistics. And while the world waited for Diddy to speak, his legal team made a stunning move. They said he wouldn't testify, no witnesses, no defense story, nothing. So what does that mean? Is it confidence, or is it silence out of fear? Because what was just exposed in court might change everything. In every high-profile trial, there's one moment that shifts the entire energy in the room. For Diddy's case, it came without warning and without a single word from him. Just as the prosecution wrapped their avalanche of evidence, Diddy's legal team stood up and dropped a bombshell. They wouldn't be calling a single witness, not one. And Diddy, he wouldn't be testifying either. No story from his side, no defense narrative. Just silence. To some, that move screamed confidence. A legal team so sure the prosecution had failed to prove its case, they didn't need to say a thing. But to others, it felt like surrender. Like there was nothing they could say that wouldn't make things worse. And while the jury processed that silence, the prosecution was just getting started with their loudest evidence yet. But the real shock came when they opened Diddy's group chats. If the jury was still on the fence, what they saw next may have shoved them off completely. Federal prosecutors pulled up text messages from Diddy's inner circle, and they weren't rumors or second-hand whispers. These were real, time-stamped chats from his staff. And what they said? Absolutely disturbing. Refresh her bag of darks. Got the Astroglide? Don't forget baby oil. These weren't late-night jokes or private banter. They were instructions, orders, logistics for preparing women for explicit encounters, casually passed around like lunch requests. And this wasn't just one or two rogue messages. It was a pattern, coordinated, repetitive, systemic. The prosecution wasn't trying to shock for the sake of headlines. They were building a case that this wasn't a celebrity being messy, this was a structured, well-oiled machine that revolved around exploitation. Because when your staff speaks like this, the question isn't just what happened. It becomes, how long has this been going on, and how many people were involved? But it didn't stop there. Next, the FBI connected the dots, and it led straight to Diddy's private jet. When Special Agent Joseph Cerciello took the stand, the courtroom shifted. This wasn't just emotional testimony or speculation, this was cold, calculated data. He came armed with timelines, receipts, flight logs, and something even more explosive, video evidence. Cerciello walked the jury through a chilling chronology. Dates where Diddy was seen boarding private jets, arriving at luxury hotels, and later coordinating meetings with escorts. Not just hearsay, but digital footprints linking everything. One moment stunned the room. Explicit videos featuring Jane Doe and other women allegedly taken during these planned encounters. According to prosecutors, these weren't random clips. The timing, locations, and even participants matched the travel logs Diddy's team had tried to downplay. It painted a picture that was hard to ignore, not just a star indulging in a wild lifestyle, but a system, organized, scheduled, and fully resourced, and it didn't end there. Because as the videos played, the prosecution revealed something far more damning. Diddy wasn't just attending these events, they claimed he was orchestrating them. But to prove that, they'd have to follow the money trail. And that's where things got even murkier. If the videos and messages raised eyebrows, the financial records nearly dropped jaws. The prosecution unveiled a spreadsheet, neat, detailed, and devastating. Dozens of transactions tracked everything from hotel bookings to private jet invoices, cash payments to escort services, even wire transfers labeled under vague corporate expenses. But when investigators matched those transactions with travel dates and explicit video timelines, it started to look like more than just a lavish lifestyle. This wasn't just Diddy spending like a celebrity. Prosecutors argued it was a blueprint for trafficking, masked under business accounts and luxury branding. Hotels in Miami, LA, and the Bahamas, booked under corporate names. Escorts paid through middlemen. Flights arranged for specific women on specific dates. The implication? This wasn't about personal pleasure. It was about power, money, and control. And prosecutors claimed Diddy's empire, the studios, the parties, the glitz, all acted as a shell for something darker beneath the surface. It wasn't the kind of evidence you could wave away as just rumors. It was numbers. It was structure. But the defense wasn't done yet, because next they tried to flip the narrative and cast doubt on everything. After days of jaw-dropping evidence, the courtroom expected the defense to crumble, but instead they pivoted. Their strategy? Consent. Diddy's lawyers shifted the focus away from the logistics and into the gray area of personal choice. They introduced text messages, some from Jane Doe herself, that appeared flirtatious, suggestive, even eager. Their argument: this wasn't coercion, it was consensual. They pointed to conversations where Jane seemed to coordinate her own travel, where she responded warmly to Diddy's staff, where her tone didn't suggest fear, but familiarity. To the defense, this wasn't a trafficking operation, it was messy adult relationships, exaggerated and weaponized in court. But the prosecution pushed back hard. They argued that consent doesn't erase structure, and when money, influence, and power imbalance are involved, the line isn't just blurred, it's often manipulated. The jury was left to ask, were these messages signs of consent or survival? Still, the most chilling evidence wasn't in Jane's messages. It came from Diddy's own team, and what they were caught saying behind closed doors. And 1. Jury Diddy. If the messages from Jane Doe left room for interpretation, the ones from Diddy's staff did not. Prosecutors revealed a flood of internal communications, direct messages, texts, even email threads that painted a haunting picture. These weren't emotional conversations, they were cold, clinical, and eerily casual. Team members discussed restocking items, confirming deliveries, organizing rooms, and prepping women for specific events. One message read like a grocery list: condoms, baby oil, Astroglide. Another confirmed travel schedules. Not for artists or business partners, but for women allegedly brought in for private encounters. What made it worse? The tone. No shock, no hesitation, just routine. This wasn't chaos, it was structure. And that structure, prosecutors argued, is what made it criminal. To the jury, it became harder to believe this was just Diddy's personal life gone wild. The communications sounded like operations management, like a business model. And the staff wasn't just enabling, some appeared fully invested in keeping the system running smoothly. Which leads to the final, most critical phase of the trial, what both sides will say, and what the jury will be forced to decide next. After 4 intense weeks of testimony, evidence, and explosive revelations, it all comes down to this: the closing arguments. Both sides are preparing their final strike, hours of carefully crafted narrative meant to tip the jury in one direction or the other. For the prosecution, it's about connecting every dot, showing that this wasn't about celebrity, but control. They'll push the timeline, the transactions, the texts, all pointing to a system, not coincidence. For the defense, it's now or never. Their final chance to cast doubt, to reframe every message, every dollar spent, every interaction. Their goal? Blur the line between luxury and criminality, and convince just one juror that this entire case is built on assumption. But here's the twist. The jury doesn't just have to decide if Diddy did these things. They have to decide why. Was it a lifestyle, or was it a calculated enterprise? Because now, with everything exposed, the messages, the money, the videos, the jury is no longer wondering what happened. They're wondering how long it's been happening and how deep it really goes. And when those closing arguments hit, it may not just be a verdict on Diddy, but on everything he built. This trial was never just about one man's private life. It's about power, access, and the dangerous silence that surrounds the rich and untouchable. For years, Diddy stood at the top of music, fashion, business, the symbol of black excellence and empire. But behind the fame, prosecutors argue there was something much darker at play. A system built not just on hustle, but on human cost. His silence in court says one thing. The evidence says another. Now it's up to the jury, and maybe in a way, all of us, to decide what happens when the mask slips off a mogul. Because if even half of this is true, it's not just Diddy on trial, it's the culture that let it happen.